used to keep the parks open, and I'd like to know why.
Thank you. We can get you some information on the OHV fund. Mr. Farrell, and then Alden Olmsted and Stanley Anderson, if you'd please be ready to go. Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Mac Farrell. I'm the Preservation Associate for Environment California, a statewide citizen-funded environmental organization. First off, I want to thank these committees for hearing the speakers and panels today, and in a lot of cases for agreeing with them. I wanted to say that first off, Environment California stands by the California State Parks Foundation and working on a campaign to convince the governor or whoever else can do it to keep these state parks open. Not only do we value the endangered species, the affordable vacations that these places provide us, but our membership is calling on the governor to find a solution that will keep these parks open. And we've also been hearing from hundreds of local businesses, outdoor recreation businesses, which obviously we've heard from today, the impact of the sales tax and just the local economy, local economic revenue that local businesses get from the backpacks, tents, bikes, especially bikes, that people go out and use in the state parks. And when these parks are closed, they won't have a reason to go buy them anymore. Anyways, we're going to be organizing these voices, the voices of our members across the state, and these businesses to call on the governor specifically to reinstate the funding for the park system. Anything you can do to help, we appreciate enormously. And I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Mr. Olmsted, a famous name on this issue. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Real quickly, I just want to note for the record that if the room were still full, many of you received the closure spreadsheet because I emailed it to you or your staff, and I'm just a filmmaker who just lost his father. And it's nice that this got spread by me, but it's a little troubling that that's how our political system works, that it had to get spread by me, that these were the numbers that had to get spread. My dad, John Olmsted, built 3 important parks, and of course they're all on the closure list. He died in March of 2011, and I feel that to call these parks on the list because they're not historically significant, if Ruth were here, I would say, I'm sorry, Ruth, but you're basically saying my dad's work was not historically significant, and I really think that's pretty tough. According to the feasibility statement, I also would like to note that I had 3 weeks to prepare, and I did come prepared for
you had
this.
A spreadsheet
I have more
too.
documents.
Yeah.
Just as a note of housekeeping. This is written not by me. This is by the California Department of Parks and Recreation on Jug Handle Creek, and where they declare that it is historically significant enough to save. And that's their words, not mine. Yeah. The Pygmy Forest is due to the ancient sea terraces and the ecosystem there, and it only exists nowhere in the world where you can walk all 5 stair steps of the ecological staircase where the dwarf trees, because of the soil, grow about 3 feet tall. So I think that's pretty important to save, and I also think it's important to save because Jug Handle is the cheapest on the list, and that's also why it hasn't been mentioned. Thank you.
Good points. Thanks to you and
you brought up a lot of good points, and I really appreciate us not needing to repeat ourselves because you have made a lot of good points.
Thanks very much. Stanley Anderson, and then Michael Seaman and Michael Hanrahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dixon, appreciate it. I've given the sergeant there a picture that was taken Sunday morning by one of the merchants in Mendocino. It's looking at a pot party that's going on behind the Ford House, which is the headquarters for the Mendocino Headlands State Park. And that's one that's not on the closure list. Okay. I brought my friend here. This is Harry. He's a little harbor seal. And I'd hope to have a couple more minutes to speak because, after that nice long presentation over Handy Woods. But basically, I want to just briefly address the other 6 parks in Mendocino County. You've heard a lot about them already. But let's face it, the reality is this. In the last 10 years, all of our mills on the Mendocino coast have shut down. There is no logging mills there, or there are no logging mills. Our fishing, both commercial and sport, is under very heavy restriction. And over this 10 years, it's been a struggle, but the whole community, the whole coast, all 80 miles of it from Westport Landing all the way down to the Sonoma County line, has been struggling to develop a tourist-friendly economy. There are 12 state parks along that coastline. 6 of them are on the closure list. Now, you got to think, it's not a matter of just, well, some people are going to lose jobs. When they lose a job, they go from being a taxpayer to receiving unemployment. Now, nobody's mentioned the unemployment cost that I've heard today. I've sat here for the whole thing. But when you lose jobs in the community, the state's going to have to pick up the tab. Now, Henry had a question here, and it's based on actually some figures that Dr. Tierney had.
We're going to have to.
Okay, I know, I understand.
Henry's question real quick.
33 state parks. The $33 million you've asked to cut in the last last 2 years. Yeah. Okay, using Dr. Tierney's low number of $2.35 return per dollar spent, that's $77 million in revenue that you folks have given away.
We cannot afford to keep saving this way.
No, yeah, but Harry's question was this. I assume everybody in the legislature, and that's a broad assumption, but I think it's fairly true, that everybody went to Congress, went to college. Well, if you can do that, how did you get there? How did you get there without doing third grade math?
We get it, and we appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you, Henry. All right. Mr. Seaman, you're our last witness. Oh, Seaman and then Mr. Hanrahan. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience. I am Michael Seaman. I'm an elected official on the Fulton El Camino Recreation and Park District Board. I'm here speaking on behalf of myself. Rather than reiterate points that have been made earlier, essentially I agree with everything that's been said. As I sat there and listening to it, it occurs to me that we're treating state parks like they function in some kind of a vacuum, but they don't. They're related to everything else. Local entities, state government, we're all on the same team. And we need to think about how we can make the team function better. I really should be asking the question, what's the end game? Now, I know you have a short-term crisis to deal with, and I'm not going to stand here and say I've got all the answers for that. But what about the long-term perspective? What happens next? What is supposed to take place over the long term? And it strikes me that most of the discussion's been about the bureaucratic silos. Now, there's this guy protecting his turf, this other guy protecting his turf, and we haven't gotten to where we seek a reconciliation of that. We really need to think about what models can we use to address this long-term solution. Think about how regional districts can happen. Are you guys in the legislature, you have the ability to wave your hand and create a new level of government. You can. It's been done in the past. Think about East Bay Regional Parks and how they operate Lake Del Valle. Lake Del Valle is a state park, and it functions beautifully as a unit of the East Bay Regional Park District. Can that model be replicated? Think about how transportation was realigned so that regional entities wound up distributing the money rather than Caltrans making all the decisions. Local governments, to a large part, have not had a seat at the table. I really appreciated your search for transparency. Where is CSDA, the California Special Districts Association? Where's the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts? Where's the League of Cities? Where's CSAC? These entities are not here, need to be. There needs to be a long-term, multi-year
We would welcome
focus.
their creative thinking and any ideas you may have, and I apologize for the time constraints that we have to live by. Last public speaker, welcome.
Hi, I'm Michael Hanrahan. I am from Friends of China Camp State Park, which is a historically and culturally significant state park. So I was very surprised to see that it was on the closure list.
Yeah.
I just wanted to very briefly mention that a disproportionate number of parks on the closure list are state historic parks. And these are parks that provide an important educational function. And also by their very nature, they have a lot of historic buildings in remote locations, which are particularly vulnerable to vandalism, theft of copper wiring, and other theft of historic artifacts. So thank you very much for your time. And
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the witnesses, members of the public. We're going to wrap it up. This is not the last time probably that we will gather to take a look at this because I think we leave here probably with just as many questions as answers once again. But it does seem to me one of my takeaways here is that we have been asking the wrong question. We have been asking, how do you get to $22 million in savings through park closures? We ought to be asking some different questions in my assessment, including, can park closures even get you to $22 million? I think we've got abundant information now at our disposal to say the answer is no. The answer is just no. And so the question that we ought to be asking is, what creative strategies can we use to achieve significant savings, perhaps $22 million for the short term? And we can think about revenue strategies. We can think about partnerships. The ingredients are all here. We've heard about it enough to know that we have the ingredients to get there. But we also, as we work on that short-term bridge, we have to have a longer-term process, the kind of process that just hasn't happened to date, where we do look thoughtfully and creatively at the long term, not just keeping parks open, but actually sustaining them at the level that they have to be sustaining, whether that's long-term revenue or addressing the deferred maintenance or some of the creative amenity strategies that we've heard about but just never seem to get seriously looked at. It's time to do that, and my hope is that by having this hearing today, we will begin the process of doing it right. So thank you very much, and I'll ask my co-chair, Mr. Dickinson, to offer his final thoughts.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to embrace your thoughts and spare everyone by not repeating them, but I did want to say thank you to all those of you who've been here and stayed throughout this hearing. I appreciate not just your presence here and your comments, but the work you're doing and have been doing in many instances for years and years. You really are the backbone of what is our state park system from the public participation and support perspective. But I also think what we've heard here in many respects fills the old adage that necessity is the mother of invention, and we've heard a number of terrific ideas and initiatives that are being undertaken. But I think to support your point, Mr. Chair, we also recognize that those come with lots of questions and take time to resolve. I don't know that any of us are interested in dissolving, notwithstanding discussion of realignment. We're not interested in dissolving the state park system. We're interested in sustaining the state park system with the participation of Californians from across the state. So I don't think this is the end either. I think what we've got is a lot more to chew on coming out of today. And I encourage all of you who are in the midst of trying to make things work in your own community with your local state parks to continue the work you're doing, and we will try to do what we can to assist that work and to arrive at solutions that are acceptable here in Sacramento for the legislature and the administration as well.
Any closing thoughts from other members?
Just if I may, Mr. Chair, thank you all again for attending. I just want to make this comment that it's clear what the interest and stamina is on this issue. I think in my 3 years here serving in this august body, I've heard most from people who are trying to protect parks and puppies, and also sea otters, I'm sure. But, the same emotion that surrounds school closures, sometimes military-based closures, maybe not with this group, but, I'm struggling also with adult day health care at the moment. These are all disinvestments in our future as a state and as a nation, and I think that there's lots to learn about the interaction and the interactive nature of, when something happens in one part of the system, it certainly affects everything else. So Thank you for this very long hearing, and we'll look forward to continuing to support you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for convening this very important meeting. In deferring to some comments that Assemblymember Buchanan made about us having to be part of the solution and owning this issue and really getting behind it in a way where we have to be reasonable. On the other hand, I want to make sure that we send a message to our Parks Department about coming forward with not just one recommendation but other options. It's not simply a result of just saying, well, this is the options available today under this economic climate and under this legislative climate. This is the only thing we can do. If coming up with if thinking out of the box requires legislation, I hope they would propose what legislation is required to come up with a comprehensive solution. I would really like to look at a comprehensive solution, not just kind of a piecemeal fix, something that looks forward, that something looks, a 10-year plan for our parks, a 20-year plan for our parks. Let's offer up a multi-year proposal that we can sell to our constituency, that we can get their support in not only creating. It's nice to hear from stakeholders, but oftentimes the best ideas come from stakeholders and staff. And I think if we come up with a proposal that puts some of the heavy lifting on us as well, I'm willing to go down that path. And fight the legislative battles and really going out and looking for the endowments or reaching out to the neighborhoods that are most affected by this, and also soliciting their involvement in assets that not only involve the whole state, but that have such a direct impact in the communities that are adjacent to them. In looking back in the episode, there was an episode in the documentary on our national parks, and there was an instance where in Wyoming they fought they fought the establishment of the Grand Tetons, and they were so, I mean, they were actually exchanging bullets over opposing that, and one of the opponents later on came saying, I'm glad I lost that battle. I'm glad that we're able to preserve what is now Wyoming's greatest asset. And hopefully that message will not be lost on what we've been able to accomplish here in California. And we need to continue to protect our assets, our natural resources, and I just want to end with that.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.